Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to today's computer security class. The topic of our discussion is intrusion detection. In today's lecture, we'll discuss the subject of intrusions in computer systems. The lecture consists of two parts. First, we will examine the nature of intruders and how they attack. Then, look at strategies for detecting intrusions in computer systems. The textbook we are referring in this course is the Global and 4th edition of Computer Security Principles and Practice, authored by William Stallings. Intrusion detection is covered in Chapter 8 of this book. The learning objectives of this lecture are as flashed on this slide. First, we'll try to distinguish amongst various types of intruder behavior patterns, understand the basic principles and requirements for intrusion detection, discuss the key features of host-based intrusion detection, explain the concept of distributed host-based intrusion detection. Then we will discuss the key features of network-based intrusion detection. Then we will define the intrusion detection exchange format, explain the purpose of honeypots, and finally, I will present an overview of SNOT. Coming on to intruders and intruder behavior. A significant security problem for network system is the hostile and unwanted trespass for users or software. User trespass can take the form of unauthorized logon to a machine, or in case of an authorized user, acquisition of privileges or performance of actions beyond those that have been authorized. Software trespass can take the form of virus, worm, or Trojan horse. This chapter covers the subject of intruders. Intruder attacks range from benign to the serious. At the benign end of the scale, there are many people who simply wish to explore internets and see what is out there. At the serious end are individuals who are attempting to read privileged data, perform unauthorized modifications to data, or disrupt the system. Broad classes of intruders are cyber criminals, activists, state-sponsored organizations, and others such as hobby hackers. There is certain skill level associated with these intruders. Generally, there are three levels, that is, apprentice, journeyman, and master. Apprentices are hackers with minimal technical skill who primarily use existing attack toolkits. Journeymen are hackers with sufficient technical skills to modify and extend attack toolkits to use newly discovered or purchased vulnerabilities, or to focus on different target groups. Master level of hackers are hackers with high level technical skills, capable of discovering brand new categories of vulnerabilities or writing new powerful attack toolkits. As per NIST Special Publication 861, Examples of intrusion are as flashed on this slide. That is, performing a remote root compromise of an email server, defacing a web server, guessing and cracking passwords, copying a database containing credit card numbers, viewing sensitive data including payroll records and medical information without authorization, running a packet sniffer on a workstation to capture users' names and passwords, using a permission error on an anonymous FTP server to distribute pirated software and music files, dialing into an unsecure modem and gaining internal network access, posing as an executive, calling the help desk, resetting the executive's email password and learning the new password, using an unattended logged-in workstation without permission. Now coming on to the intruder behavior, the techniques and behavior patterns of intruders are constantly shifting to exploit newly discovered weaknesses and to evade detection and countermeasures. However, intruders typically use steps from a common attack methodology. There is a typical sequence of actions starting with a phishing attack and results in the installation of malware that steals login credentials that eventually result in compromise of a point of sale terminal. They note that while this is one specific incident scenario, the components are commonly seen in many attacks. A detailed or wider range of activities associated with intrusion are being flashed in next few slides. First is the target acquisition and information gathering, where the attacker identifies and characterizes the target systems using publicly available information, both technical and non-technical, and the use of network exploration tools to map target resources. The examples are explore corporate website for information on corporate structure, personnel key systems, as well as details of specific web server and OS used. Then gather information on target network using DNS lookup tools such as dig, host, and others, and query whois database. Map network or accessible services using tools such as Nmap, send query email to customer service contact, review response for information on mail client, server, and OS used, and details of persons responding. Identify potentially vulnerable services. For example, the vulnerability in the content management system. Then comes the initial access. This is another intruder behavior. The initial access to a target system, typically by exploiting a remote network vulnerability, by guessing weak authentication credentials used in remote service, or via the installation of malware on the system using some form of social engineering or drive-by download attack, as we discussed in Chapter 6. Examples are as flashed on this slide, that is the guessing the user's web CMS password, exploit vulnerability in web CMS plugin to gain system access, sends spear phishing email with link to web browser exploit to key people. The next intruder behavior is the privilege escalation. Privilege escalation is primarily actions taken on the system, typically via local access vulnerability, to increase privileges available to the attacker to enable their desired goals on the target system. The examples are scan system for applications with local exploit, exploit any vulnerable application to gain elevated privileges, install sniffers to capture administrator passwords, use captured administrator password to access privileged information. The next intruder behavior is information gathering or system exploit. These are primarily actions by the attacker to access or modify information or resources on the system, or to navigate to another target system. The examples are scan files for desired information, transfer large numbers of documents to external repository, use guessed or captured passwords to access other servers on network. Then is maintaining access. These are the actions as the installation of backdoors or other malicious software. The examples are install remote administration tool or rootkit with backdoor for later access, use administrator password to later access network, modify or disable antivirus or IDS programs running on the system. The next intruder behavior is covering tracks, where the attacker disables or edits audit logs to remove evidence of attack activity and uses rootkits and other measures to hide covertly installed files or code. The examples are use rootkit to hide files installed on system, edit log files to remove entries generated during the intrusion. Starting with the intrusion detection basics, first we'll go through two important terminologies, that is security intrusion and intrusion detection. As per RFC 2828, the definitions are as flashed on this slide. Security intrusion is a security event or combination of multiple security events that constitutes a security incident in which an intruder gains or attempts to gain access to a system or system resource without having authorization to do so. Intrusion detection is a security service that monitors and analyzes system events for the purpose of finding and providing real-time or near real-time warning of attempts to access system resources in an unauthorized manner. Components of intrusion detection system. An IDS comprises of three logical components: sensors, analyzers, and user interface. Sensors are responsible for collecting data. The input for a sensor may be any part of a system that could contain evidence of an intrusion. Types of input to a sensor includes network packets, log files, and system call tracers. Sensors collect and forward this information to the analyzer. Analyzers receive input from one or more sensors or from other analyzers. Analyzers are responsible for determining an intrusion has occurred. Output analyzer is an indication that intrusion has occurred. Output may include evidence supporting the conclusion that intrusion has occurred. Analyzers may provide guidance about what actions to take as a result of intrusion. The sensor inputs may also be stored for future analysis and review in a storage or database component. The user interface to an intrusion detection system enables a user to view output from the system or to control the behavior of the system. In some systems, the user interface may equate to a manager, director, or console component. The types of IDS. IDSs are often classified based on the source and type of data analyzed. That is, the number one is host-based IDS, or in short, HIDS. Host-based IDS monitors the characteristics of a single host and the events occurring within the host, such as process identifiers and the system calls they make for evidence of suspicious activity. Number two is network-based IDS, or in short, NIDS. Network-based IDS monitors network traffic for particular network segments or devices and analyzes network transport and application protocols to identify suspicious activity. Distributed or hybrid IDS combines information from a number of sensors, often both host and network based, in a central analyzer that is able to better identify and respond to intrusion activity. Coming on to basic principles, authentication facilities, access control facilities, and firewalls all play a role in countering intrusions. Another line of defense is intrusion detection, and this has been the focus of much research in recent years. This interest is motivated by number of considerations. Consideration number one is, if an intrusion is detected quickly enough, the intruder can be identified and ejected from the system before any damage is done or any data are compromised. Even if the detection is not sufficiently timely to preempt the intruder, the sooner that the intrusion is detected, the less the amount of damage and more quickly that recovery can be achieved. An effective IDS can serve as a deterrent, thus acting to prevent intrusions. Intrusion detection enables the collection of information about intrusion techniques that can be used to strengthen intrusion prevention measures. Intrusion detection is based on the assumption that the behavior of the intruder differs from that of legitimate user in ways that can be quantified. Of course, we cannot expect that there will be a crisp and exact distinction between an attack by an intruder and the normal use of resources by an authorized user. Rather, we must expect that there will be some overlap as shown in this figure, shown on this slide. Patterns of legitimate user behavior can be established by observing past history, and significant deviation from such patterns can possibly be detected. Although the typical behavior of an intruder differs from the typical behavior of an authorized user, there is an overlap in these behaviors. Thus, a loose interpretation of intruder behavior, which will catch from intruders, will also lead to a number of false positives or authorized users identified as intruders. On the other hand, an attempt to limit false positives by a tight interpretation of intruder behavior will lead to an increase in false negatives or intruders not identified as intruders. Thus, there is an element of compromise and art in the practice of intrusion detection. Ideally, you want an IDS to have a high detection rate, that is the ratio of detected to total attacks, while minimizing the false alarm rate, the ratio of incorrectly classified to total normal usage. Now coming on to the requirements of IDS. The IDS should run continually with minimal human supervision. It should be fault tolerant in the sense that it must be able to recover from system crashes and reinitializations. An IDS should resist subversion, that is, the IDS must be able to monitor itself and detect if it has been modified by an attacker. It should be able to impose a minimal overhead on the system where it is running. IDS should be able to be configured according to the security policies of the system that is being monitored. Be able to adapt to the changes and user behavior over time. It should also be able to scale to monitor a large number of hosts. IDS provide graceful degradation of service in the sense that if some component of IDS stop working for any reason, the rest of them should be effective as little as possible. IDS should also allow dynamic reconfiguration, that is the ability to reconfigure the IDS without having to restart it. Now we will discuss IDS analysis approaches. IDSs typically use one of the two alternative approaches to analyze sensor data to detect intrusions, that is anomaly detection and signature or heuristic detection. Anomaly detection involves the collection of data relating to the behavior of legitimate users over a period of time. Then current observed behavior is analyzed to determine with a high level of confidence whether this behavior is that of a legitimate user or alternatively that of an intruder. In case of signature or heuristic detection, it uses a set of known malicious data patterns, that is called signatures, or attack rules called heuristics, that are compared with current behavior to decide if it is that of an intruder. It is also known as misuse detection. This approach can only identify known attacks for which it has patterns or rules. The anomaly detection approach involves first developing a model of legitimate user behavior by collecting and processing sensor data from normal operation of monitored system in a training phase. This may occur at distinct times, or there may be a continuous process of monitoring and evolving the model over time. Once this model exists, current observed behavior is compared with the model in order to classify it as either legitimate or anomalous activity in a detection phase. A variety of classification approaches are used. However, anomaly detection is broadly categorized as statistical knowledge-based and machine learning. Statistical approaches use the captured sensor data to develop a statistical profile of the observed matrix. The earliest approaches used univariate models, where each metric was created as an independent random variable. However, this was too crude to effectively identify intruder behavior. Later, multivariate models considered correlations between the metrics with better levels of discrimination observed. Time series models use the order and time between observed events to better classify the behavior. The advantages of these statistical approaches include their relatively simplicity and low computation cost and lack of assumptions about behavior expected. Their disadvantages include the difficulty in selecting suitable metrics to obtain a reasonable balance between false positives and false negatives, and that not all behaviors can be modeled using these approaches. Knowledge-based approaches classify the observed data using a set of rules. These rules are developed during the training phase, usually manually, to characterize the observed training data into distinct classes. Formal tools may be used to describe these rules, such as finite state machine or a standard description language. They are then used to classify the observed data in the detection phase. The advantages of knowledge-based approaches include their robustness and flexibility. Their main disadvantage is the difficulty and time required to develop high-quality knowledge from the data and the need for human experts to assist with this process. Machine learning approaches use data mining techniques to automatically develop a model using the labeled normal training data. This model is then able to classify subsequently observed data as either normal or anomalous. A key disadvantage is that this process typically requires significant time and computational resources once the model is generated. However, subsequent analysis is generally fairly efficient. A variety of machine learning approaches have been tried with varying success. These include Bayesian networks, neural networks, fuzzy logic, genetic algorithms, clustering, and outlier detection. Machine learning approaches have been included in the current slide to develop your interest to study these approaches for application to practical IDS systems. The advantages of the machine learning approaches include their flexibility, adaptability, and ability to capture interdependencies between the observed metrics. Their disadvantages include their dependency on assumptions about accepted behavior of a system, their currently unacceptability, high false alarm rate, and their high resource cost. A key limitation of anomaly detection approaches used by IDSs, particularly the machine learning approaches, is that they are generally only trained with legitimate data, unlike many of the other applications surveyed where both legitimate and anomalous training data is used. The lack of anomalous training data, which occurs given the desire to detect currently unknown future attacks, limits the effectiveness of some of the techniques which have been shown on these two slides. Anomaly detection uses two more techniques, that is the threshold detection and profile based. The threshold detection involves counting the numbers of occurrences of a specific event type over an interval of time. If the count surpasses what is considered a reasonable number, that one might expect to occur, then intrusion is assumed. Threshold analysis by itself is a crude and ineffective detector of even moderately sophisticated attacks. Both the threshold and the time interval must be determined because of the variability across users. Such thresholds are likely to generate either a lot of false positives or a lot of false negatives. However, simple threshold detectors may be useful in conjunction with more sophisticated techniques. Profile-based anomaly detection focuses on characterizing the past behavior of the individual users or related groups of users and then detecting significant deviations. A profile may consist of a set of parameters so that deviation on just a single parameter may not be sufficient in itself to signal an alert. The foundation of this approach is an analysis of the audit records. The audit records provide input to the intrusion detection function in two ways. First, the designer must decide on a number of quantitative metrics that can be used to measure user behavior. Examples include counter, gauge, interval timer, resource utilization. An analysis of audit records over a period of time can be used to determine the activity profile of the average user. Thus, the audit records serve to define typical behavior. Second, current audit records are the input used to detect intrusion. That is, the intrusion detection model analyzes incoming audit records to determine deviation from average behavior. Various tests can be performed to determine whether current activity fits within the acceptable limits, such as mean and standard deviation, multivariate model, Markov process model, time series model, and operational model. The next is the signature or heuristic detection. Signature or heuristic techniques detect intrusion by observing events in the system and applying either a set of signature patterns to the data or a set of rules that characterize the data, leading to a decision regarding whether the observed data indicates normal or anomalous behavior. Signature approaches match a large collection of known patterns of malicious data against data stored on a system or in a transit over a network. The signatures need to be large enough to minimize the false alarm rate while still detecting a sufficiently large fraction of malicious data. This approach is widely used in antivirus products, in network traffic scanning proxies, and in network-based IDS. The advantages of this approach include the relatively low cost in time and resource use and its wide acceptance. Disadvantages include the significant effort required to constantly identify and review new malware to create signatures able to identify it, and the inability to detect zero-day attacks for which no signatures exist. Rule-based heuristic identification involves the use of rules for identifying known penetrations or penetrations that would exploit known weaknesses. Rules can also be defined that identify suspicious behavior even when the behavior is within the bounds of established patterns of usage. Typically, the rules used in these systems are specific to the machine and operating system. The most fruitful approach to developing such rules is to analyze attack tools and scripts collected on the internet. These rules can be supplemented with the rules generated by acknowledgeable security personnel. In this latter case, the normal procedure is to interview system administrators and security analysts to collect a suite of known penetration scenarios and key events that can threaten the security of target system. Now we are going to start with part 2 of the lecture, that is the host-based intrusion detection system.